represents us, she represents the Lord. We need to be holding her up while she's there. Oh, can I just confess for a minute? When I was younger, keys used to be very important to me. Keys were, I don't know if it was a status symbol or something, but I had keys for everything. One of my favorite possessions back then, and it's more recently than I need to confess, I'm over the key thing. I don't have any keys in my pockets right now. I hate carrying things in my pockets other than my pocket knife. So I leave my keys back there, and I carry as few keys on that ring as I can. But back then, I loved keys, and I had this really cool key ring. It had rings on each end, and they were hooked in the middle by what looked like an air pressure chuck. Those of you that work with air tools know that little quick release thing. You could put it together, and you had two rings and had keys on it, and you could pull it apart, and you could run inside when you forgot something, but you could leave the car run while you went back into the house or back into your office and leave either the heat or the air conditioning running, whichever happened to be appropriate to the time. But now I need to just tell you to remember, if you happen to have one of those key rings, remember not to push the lock button with your elbow when you get out of your car, and then close the door with the keys in it in the car running. Now, if you have AAA, that's okay, but otherwise you're just kind of standing there with this befuddled look on your face, wondering, how am I about to get back into my car? I had keys for everything on that key ring. Keys to all of our cars. I think we had 3 at the time. Keys to my office. Keys to the filing cabinets. I had keys to my tree stand locks. I had keys for our travel trailer. I had keys to my parents' house, both front door and back. I had keys to my grandparents' house and some of their storage shed. I felt like my keys were my power. And you just make that noise when you walk down the street with your keys rattling and say, yeah, that guy's somebody. He has all those. My hero in high school was the high school janitor, because that dude had a key ring. Keys were power. And I think I come by that, it's an inheritance thing. My grandfather had a huge ring of keys. It was only one ring. It wasn't like my pull-apart quick connect key ring. His was just one ring, and it was huge. The ring itself had to have been 2.5 inches in diameter. He had more keys than I could ever imagine. Which was all well and good till after he passed away. I found myself holding his ring of keys in my hand. Now that sounds like a key lover's dream, doesn't it? Except, I was trying to figure out which one of those 2, 3, 4 dozen keys opened the garage. And 10 or 15 of them looked identical. And he had to work them all to find out. I was even more amazed because near the end of his life, he was blind. And he could tell which one of those keys was which just by feel. But then I got to realizing, of all of those keys on that ring, there were only about 3 or 4 of them that did anything, that opened anything. But amazingly, as we were going through that ring, we found one of those keys opened a drawer. Are you ready for this? Opened a drawer that had more keys in it. Keys to things we had no idea what they were for. As they go through the house, they find more keys. We still can't figure out what half of those keys went to. And I confess, in my days with my key infatuation, I probably had a lot of keys that I couldn't tell you what they go to either. Have you ever realized you have keys hanging around, hanging on your key ring, hanging in your junk drawer? You know, that drawer that nobody likes to talk about, the one where everything comes out of your pocket and goes into, you have no idea what they're for. Keys that have no earthly purpose whatsoever. Okay, maybe you're not a key person. Maybe for you, it's cords. Because everything today comes with a power cord. Everything today comes with a connection cord. Maybe you have one of those electronics drawers that has cables for the VCR. Yes, you remember the VCRs? They used to come in 2 different sizes, beta and VHS. You have so many cords, you have a beta and a VHS cord. Cords for the DVDs, chargers for the phones. Phones that used to be the big one with the antenna, you still got the charger for it in your drawer. Chargers for the Game Boys or the Nintendos or the spare cord for whatever kitchen appliance you might have. Because after all, you never know when you might need that particular cord again. Even if you can't remember what the cord's for. You know the one that I'm talking about, the plastic one with the head on it about this big that's so old, it's electrical cord wrapped in cloth, not vinyl. We can't forget. We've forgotten the purposes, but we might need that cord. You see, I need to just share with you this morning that there are times in our life, times when we go through life, that we lose sight of our purpose. We lose track of why we were here. As Christians, sometimes we become like that ring of keys that my grandfather carried that had keys on it for 4 or 5 cars previous that have long been crushed and locks that we have no idea. Or like that one lone cord in your cord drawer that went to a waffle iron in 1952. We lose sight of our purpose and forget why we were here. You see, we were created to glorify God. We were created to live on this earth and live in relationship with Him. We have and are being made holy by His love and by His grace. You see, Paul, in Romans, as he's writing to those Roman Christians to introduce himself to them, is well aware that sometimes we lose sight of the purpose for which God created us. In Romans chapter 6, Paul is talking about purpose. He's talking to Christians about the new life that they experienced, that new life that was purchased by Jesus Christ through His blood shed on Calvary's cross. He's talking about that new life that comes when we are dead in baptism and raised up to new life. The old ways are gone and replaced with new. Paul's reminding the Roman Christians, and he's reminding us today, that how we live our life in the world matters. How we live our life every day in the world reveals purpose, reveals our own identity, reveals our own ideas about why we're here. I need to say that again. How we live our life every single day. And I want to just remove this setting for a minute, because y'all come here for about an hour and a half or 2 hours on Sunday morning, and it's easy to pull the wool over one another's eyes. I mean, because we put on our Sunday best, and we come with our Bibles and our cups of coffee in hand, and it's easy to fool folks here. You see, I'm concerned about the other 6.5 days of the week, as is Paul, because it's how we live our life those other 6.5 days of the week that reveal what our own awareness of our purpose is. It reveals whether we get the idea that we are here to glorify God, or whether we're here to glorify ourselves. How we live our lives reveals to whom we belong. Can I just share with you this morning? God cares about what we are members of. God cares about what we are members of. And to whom we belong. And I would ask at the outset of this message this morning, what is it that we are members of? Now, some of those things you carry membership cards to. If I get it out of my pocket. You see, there's my bank card, but right behind it is my AAA card. Boy, has that thing come in handy this summer. I'm a member of AAA, so my daughter's car got towed twice this month. There's my Sam's Club card. I'm a member of Sam's Club, so I can go and I can buy a 55-gallon drum full of toothpaste every week. Well, maybe not. There's one that I'm proud of. That's my Starbucks Gold card. My rewards card for Starbucks. God cares about what we're members of, but you know, the amazing thing is, there are those things, like I carry my Starbucks reward card in my wallet, that it's out there for everybody to see. But there's many other things that we are members of, many things that we belong to, that maybe aren't quite that apparent, because we give ourselves to them every day. Paul says in Romans 6:16, do you not know that if you present yourselves as anyone to obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, either of sin which leads to death, or of obedience which leads to righteousness. You are either a slave to sin or a slave to righteousness. He's reminding us, Paul is, of this principle of life. We do not have an option as to whether or not we will be subservient. It's ironic that I would preach about freedom this morning. Well, not really, because it's our Freedom Week. You know, we talk about freedom, but the freedom that so many people talk about is an illusion, because we're not really free. You think you're free. The advertisers know you're not free. How many times are you sitting watching a movie about 8:30, 9 o'clock, or 10 o'clock at night, and a commercial comes on TV? The commercial for Breyer's ice cream. And you think in your head, boy, I'd like a bowl of ice cream about now. That's only a small illustration. Paul says, the fact of the matter is, we are slaves to the one to whom we give our life. Whether to Jesus Christ or the powers of sin. Well, say, Pastor Art, it's nothing like that. Yes, it is. Because how we live our lives it illustrates to whom we belong, who is Lord of our life. Now watch. Here's how it works out. You guys know I'm a pastor, right? I've been a pastor for 23, almost 24 years. I deal with people all the time who will come to me with this problem. Pastor Art, I've got this problem and I can't stop. And you fill in the blank, whatever it might be. Or, here's one I hate. They'll say, well, I don't know why I did that. I guess the devil made me do it. Brothers and sisters in Jesus, if you say that in my presence, I am going to rebuke you in his name. Because to say that is to reveal who's Lord of our life. Paul's talking about the fact that life comes into us, and we have this ability, this God-given ability to give ourselves to him and live free from the things that entangle us, free from the sins that suck the life from us, free from the sin that separates us from God, if we live it. Did I really just say that? No, Paul said it. Paul said it. Brothers, we write these things so that you might live life. He's reminding us that we don't have an option as to whether or not we serve. The choice is whom we'll serve. And that's not a new concept in Scripture. Joshua has this to say. He challenges all of Israel when they get ready to go over to the Promised Land. He says, choose you today whom you will serve. And there's a whole thing. He says, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua isn't just making a statement of life. He is making a pledge. He's saying, you all can do what you want to do, but I am a follower of the one true God, and I will live my life according to his plan. I will live my life at his leading, at his whim, not my own. And of course, you see through Israel's history, all those years later, they never quite get that. Because they say with their mouth, I'll serve the Lord. But they serve other gods. They save security. They serve security. They serve prosperity. They serve what the other countries do. And their life illustrates the fact it is not lived for God. You see, there's a great deal of discussion today about freedom. and freedom from sin. And as a pastor, and not just as a pastor, as a brother in Christ, I see people all the time who live defeated lives spiritually. They're enslaved by sins, by habits they can't break. And not just habits, they live in bondage to years-old scars, years-old hurts that they just can't let go of. Things they can't break, scars they can't heal. They sing about freedom, but live in bondage. They talk about freedom, but say, I can't help myself. So many times, there's a reason why they live their lives defeated. Because they continue to give themselves to the sin that wars against their soul. You see, it kind of goes like this. You do what you think about. You are what you think about. Where you are so many times determines what you do. So many times people plead the grace of Jesus Christ. They pray here on a Sunday morning for forgiveness. They talk to one another about the need for forgiveness, yet they continue to offer up their bodies, their minds, to the gods of this age through their habits, through their associations, through their entertainments. Yes, I said entertainments. And through their practices. Think of it like this. If I'm on a diet, I know I should be, if I'm on a diet, that's all I'm going to say about that. If I'm on a diet, there are certain things that I should eat, right? All those green vegetables, which by the way I love, I'm not a vegetable hater. Plenty of water, my daughter tells me frequently. Good, healthy things, low fat, all that. No, I'm on a diet and I'm serious about it. Cheesecake is probably not one of those things that I should be eating. Because although it's delicious, it's very much not good for me. So, I'm on a diet. I probably shouldn't make the trip up to Christiana, to the Cheesecake Factory, and buy one of their peanut butter cup cheesecakes, which, by the way, are amazingly delicious. I should not buy one of those peanut butter cheesecakes, put it in the cooler, drive it home, and put it in my refrigerator. Because I'm not supposed to eat peanut butter cheesecake if I'm on a diet. And I just need to tell you, I have the willpower of a starved gnat when it comes to cheesecake. So, if I'm on a diet, and I go to Christiana, and I buy a cheesecake, and I bring it home, what are the chances that I'm going to be sitting there watching a movie some evening, and that cheesecake is in my refrigerator? What do you suppose the chances are that my breath is going to smell like peanut butter cheesecake? Probably, there it is, probably pretty good. You see, if the peanut butter cheesecake is not in the house, I'm probably not going to be tempted in it. However, if that peanut butter cheesecake is in the house, I'm going to have peanut butter crumbs in my mustache. I'm just not that strong. That is exactly what Paul's talking about here in Romans chapter 6. About what we give our life to. I want to read to you a passage from Oswald Chambers. It happens to be this morning's devotional. If you have Chambers' book, My Utmost for His Highest, he says it so very well. When God changes you through regeneration, giving you new life through spiritual rebirth, your life initially has the characteristic of being maimed. And by the way, the verse that he uses is Matthew 5:30, where Jesus says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, cast it from you. For it's more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about those things that cause you to sin, cutting them out of your life, whatever it might be. When God changes you through regeneration, giving you new life through spiritual rebirth. Your life initially has the characteristic of being maimed. There are 101 things you dare not do, things which would be sin for you, and which would be readily recognized as sin by those who really know you. But the unspiritual people around you will say, "What's so wrong with that anyhow? How absurd you are. There has never yet been a saint who has not lived a maimed life initially. Yet, it's better to enter into life maimed but lovely in God's sight than to appear lovely to man's eyes but lame to God's." At first, Jesus Christ, through his Holy Spirit, has to restrain you from doing a great many things that may be perfectly right for everyone else, but not right for you. My utmost for his highest devotional, June 29th. You see, Paul recognizes that if we are to live the life that God would have us to, if we are to live in the freedom that he promises us, we must do things differently. The good news is, we do not have to live defeated lives. No one needs to go around being enslaved to sin any longer. But we must obediently follow Jesus Christ and create that environment in our life where he has the freedom to do in us what he can do in us. Let me be a little more transparent than my key thing this morning. When I was a teenager, you all know that I was a pastor's kid. From the time I was 10, I guess I've lived in a parsonage now for nearly 40 years. And that's a blessing and that's a cursing. Because living in a parsonage, you see a lot of things you probably shouldn't see, a lot of sides of the church you shouldn't see, and that really wounded me through my teen years. And for the longest time, I was absolutely dead set against doing anything in the church. But I was a good pastor's kid. I was at church every time the doors were open because that's what my dad did for a living. And I put my church face on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and all 5 or 6 nights of revival and all the fellowships. That's what I did. But the person that I was away from the church was completely different. And how that worked out for me was I became a world-class curser. I invented swear words. I was good at it. I was all-state curser my senior year in high school. I was good at it. But you see, something happened in the middle of my junior year in high school. The Lord began to speak to me. The Lord began to remind me that he was bigger than a church group. He wasn't just a church to go to. He was a relationship to be lived. And if I was going to follow him, there was this calling that he placed on my life. And I can still take you to the dairy barn where it happened, out in Jenner's Crossroads, Pennsylvania. He said, "I want you to preach my word." But you see, I realized something. If I was going to follow Jesus Christ, if I was going to be a son of God, that language that I developed that would cause the hair on a saint's head to curl tightly and fall out couldn't be a part of my life. And my language had to glorify God. So I had to give that to him. And over the years, he cleaned me up and he cleansed me and made me new. But a funny thing happened to me by the time I graduated from college. I began to pastor. Well, before I even began to pastor, I had secular jobs. I was a service manager for Avis Car Rental, then National Car Rental, and that meant I had to work around people. Not church people. Some not very nice people. And as I associated with them, I realized something. Those old habits, those old words were creeping back into my vocabulary again. And I had to go to the Lord and be reminded that this thing, right here, it was his, it wasn't mine anymore. And if I was going to serve him, I had to change who I hung out with. I had to work with him, but I didn't have to hang with him after work. And he had to do his work in me again. And you see, there are things in our life, when the life of Jesus Christ enters into us, then we have to flee. If the righteousness of Jesus Christ is going to reign in us. Because you see, one thing I know about bad habits, if you don't change who helped cause the habits, you're never going to break the power. You don't take a freshly delivered alcoholic and take him back to the bar. Can't be around it. Those habits creep back in. And Paul's saying, if we would be free, we must create that new environment by and through the grace of God, where he can continue to do his work in us, where the old habits die and new ones come, where he creates those new things in us that yield the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. We have to change sometimes, not only where we go, but what we do and what we watch and what we listen to, because all of those things form habits that can war against our soul if we allow it. See, the good news is we can be free. We do not need to live in bondage to sin. We don't need to live in perpetual guilt. Listen to verse 16 again. But thanks be to God that you, having once been slaves to sin, have become obedient from the